First of all, I would like to thank His Grace Ramachandra Prabhu for giving me this wonderful opportunity to glorify Krishna and his pastimes and his beauty. I'm always looking for opportunities for talking about Krishna. And thank you so much, Mother Rukmavati, for giving a nice introduction. Thank you so much. I feel quite humbled. And I have a special presentation for all of you. It's actually a PowerPoint presentation. So it'll be an audio-visual presentation. And towards the end, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. And again, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So please forgive me for any offenses or any mistakes that I make during my presentation. Hare Krishna. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Trying to get in the presentation mode. So if you can just bear with me. Can everyone see this clearly?
Yes, but not in the presentation. At the bottom, there's an icon for presentation next to the one.
Okay, can everyone see this?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a talk on the beauty, the form, and the incarnations of Lord Krishna. And initially, I was going to talk about the pastimes also, but my presentation actually went very long. So today we'll be discussing the beauty of the Lord, the different forms, as well as the incarnations. So we will start with who exactly is Krishna. As aspiring devotees of the Lord, we know exactly who Krishna is. Srila Prabhupada has indicated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's the most supreme. But what else do we know about Sri Krishna? That is what I'm going to discuss. So, Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedant Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityanand Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adigaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So who is Krishna? Sri Brahma Samhita 5.1 quotes, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachat Ananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karakam. In fact, this verse by Lord Brahma completely describes who Krishna is. Quote, Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. Sachat Ananda Vigraha. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the supreme or the prime cause of all causes. So this gives a very wonderful definition of our wonderful Lord, that he is the all in all, and he's the topmost Supreme Lord. As I mentioned here, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Srila Prabhupada has specifically used the word Supreme Personality of Godhead. He did not simply refer to Krishna as God, because there's a lot of misconception, particularly with regard to polytheistic religions such as Hinduism, where there are more than one God. There's so many gods, but those are actually not gods. They're all demigods, and they're all part and parcels of Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada was really adamant about using the definition that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the word personality actually is very, very important, because that indicates a very personal nature of the Lord. So we know about the three forms of the Lord. We know about the impersonal aspect as Brahman, then the localized aspect as Paramatma, and then the absolute aspect as Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is the personal aspect of Lord Krishna. And that is why Srila Prabhupada really referred to the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there should not be any misconception that Krishna is an impersonal power or an energy which does not have any form. Anything that has a personality has to be a person. And so this is a wonderful definition that Srila Prabhupada has used. So there are 6 very important attractive qualities of the Lord, which are mentioned in Vishnu Puran 6.5.47. And in fact, it is mentioned by Parashar Muni. I'm just going to read them. Aishvarasya samagrasya viryasya yashasa shriya Dhyana Vairagyesho Chaiva Shannam Bhaga Itingana. So what are the 6 main opulences of the Lord? We all know the Lord is completely full in beauty. He is the most wealthy. He is the strongest of anyone. He is the most famous. He is full of knowledge. And the 6th very interesting feature of the Lord is renunciation. When we look at the top 5 features, beauty, wealth, strength, fame, and knowledge, these are very interesting attributes. These are basically assets. But despite having all these wonderful 5 assets in full, the Lord is not attached to any of these. And that is why his 6th quality is known as the most renounced, or he has a wonderful quality of renunciation. So as I mentioned earlier, the Lord is the most beautiful. And whichever temple we belong to, we actually get attached to those deities. I have been living in Los Angeles for the past 25 years. So naturally, I'm very, very attached to our presiding deities here, Sri Sri Rukmini Dwarkadhish. So no matter what deity we are looking at in whatever center, the Lord is the most beautiful and the most gorgeous. And the way Srila Prabhupada has set the standards in ISKCON temples regarding the deities, you simply have to look at all the deities in different ISKCON temples, and you just can't imagine how beautiful they are. They are decorated so beautifully, they're dressed so beautifully, and it's all coming from Srila Prabhupada, because he's given us those guidelines and those instructions how to decorate the deity very gorgeously so that they can attract every single soul. So that's one feature of the Lord. He's very beautiful. The second feature is that he is the strongest. In fact, there are so many pastimes of the Lord, whether we talk about Mathura or Dwarka or Vrindavan, this is just a representation of the Lord lifting the Govardhan hill on his pinky finger. And no one can actually comprehend how little Krishna can actually lift the entire mountain of Govardhan on his little pinky finger. So he is actually the strongest of the strong. And one can even think of Ananta Shesh, who is actually an expansion of Lord Krishna. He is holding all the planets on his hood of the entire universal system. So one can imagine how strong Lord Krishna is. The third quality is he is the most knowledgeable. And the most important book in this world today is the Bhagavad Gita. And that is actually a summary of how to lead our life and how not to lead our life, which is given by Lord Krishna himself. So who could be better than Lord Krishna to enlighten Arjun and give him the knowledge which enabled him to really understand who he is and how to perform his duty. So if we do need the best knowledge in the world, whether it's material knowledge or whether it's spiritual knowledge, we simply have to turn to the most beautiful book known as Bhagavad Gita, because it's spoken by the Lord himself. The fourth characteristic is the Lord is the most famous. Of course, Krishna is very famous. You go to any part of India and everyone knows Krishna. But what to speak of India? Srila Prabhupada has made Krishna famous all over the world. In fact, Lord Jagannath is the Lord of the universe. And now with the advent of Rath Yatra for the past 40 or 45 years, in every town and village of the world, Krishna has become extremely famous. He has not become famous. He was always famous. It's just manifesting in the Western world for the past 45 to 50 years. So the Lord is extremely famous for his activities, for his beauty, for all that he encompasses. And then, of course, we also know that Krishna is the wealthiest, he is the most opulent, and he's the richest. And this feature actually comes into play mostly in Dwarka, where he is surrounded by his queens and, of course, his consorts, which are the goddesses of fortune, who are worshipping him. One can only imagine how opulent and how rich Krishna is if the goddesses of fortune themselves are worshipping Krishna as their dearmost Lord. So he is the most wealthiest. And finally, the most interesting, particularly to me, I'm trying to understand is, despite having all those wonderful 5 qualities, Krishna is not attached to anything. He's not at all attached. He's completely Atmaram. And one can see from these images here whether the Lord is studying in the ashram of Sandipani Muni, or he's massaging the lotus feet of his elder brother, Lord Balaram, in the forest, playing with the gopas, or even welcoming Sudamaji in his kingdom of Dwarka, one can simply see how renounced Krishna is. He's not attached to his wealth or his beauty. He completely is renounced and serving all these wonderful associates, whether it's his teacher, whether it's his elder brother, or whether it's his friend, and he's always serving them to the best of his capacity. Who can imagine that God himself would be washing the feet of his devotee? Only God is capable of doing that. We would be completely misguided by a false sense of ego, but Krishna, of course, is the supreme. So he is capable of doing each and everything that he wants to. So these are the 6 primary opulences of Lord Krishna. Of course, he's completely unlimited, so there's no question of a limitation on his opulences, but these are the predominant 6 opulences which the Lord possesses in 100% or absolute nature. So as I mentioned earlier, Krishna is the origin of all, and he has 64 qualities. It's very technical and very scientific. And I just want to make a confession here that when I was beginning to get attracted to Krishna consciousness, I was very skeptical earlier in 1994 and 95, because I have been really conditioned to think like a scientist, having been in the scientific stream for many, many years. So when I started reading the Bhagavatam, it was so scientific, so precise, and so systematic that I really fell in love with the entire concept of Krishna consciousness. For instance, this is just one example that Srila Prabhupada has given, that Krishna has 64 qualities. And of these 64, 50 qualities are found in all the jivas, but in very, very small quantity. So Srila Prabhupada has told us very clearly that qualitatively, all of us are identical with Krishna. We all are searching for bliss. We all have knowledge, but we have been deluded by a false sense of ego, which has completely covered us in illusion. But overall, we do share 50 qualities with the Lord, but quantitatively, these are very, very minute. And then there are 5 extra qualities which are present only in Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. And these qualities are also synonymous with Lord Krishna's qualities, but they're only partially manifest in the Lords Brahma and Lord Shiva. Then there are additional 5 qualities in Lord Vishnu. So that brings a total of 60 qualities. So that leaves 4 qualities. And these 4 qualities are exclusively present in Lord Krishna alone, Swayam Bhagavan. And I'll discuss those 4 qualities. They are very, very sweet qualities. And this is extensively delineated in Srila Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion, as well as Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela. So what are the 5 qualities in Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva? As we know, Lord Brahma is actually Jiva Tattva, and Lord Shiva is neither Jiva Tattva and nor Vishnu Tattva. Shiva has his own Tattva, which is known as Shiva Tattva. And the common example that Srila Prabhupada gives us is milk and yogurt. So if Lord Krishna is milk, yogurt is another manifestation of milk. It's not milk, yet it is derived from milk. That's why Lord Shiva can be compared to yogurt derived from milk, which is Lord Krishna. So the 5 qualities that Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva have they are always situated in their original position. That means they are never changing. They are both all cognizant. They know exactly what's going on in every person's heart. It is also mentioned, one will be very surprised. In fact, when I read this quality, that they are always fresh and youthful, it came as a bit of a surprise, because when you see the pictures of Lord Brahma, he's always shown as someone who has white hair and white beard. So this quality, which is listed as always fresh and youthful, is very interesting. They are always fresh and youthful, no matter how they manifest themselves externally, but they are always fresh and youthful. The 4th quality is they have a concentrated form of eternity, knowledge, as well as bliss. And finally, they both possess all mystic perfection. But one has to remember that these 5 qualities are manifested only partially in Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. They're not manifested fully, and they're only manifested in Lord Krishna in wholesome. So these are 5 extra qualities present in Brahma and Shiva. Now there are 5 qualities in Lord Vishnu. Now we're talking about Vishnu Tattva. What does Lord Vishnu have that the Jeev Tattvas and Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva don't have? Lord Vishnu possesses inconceivable superpower, and we know there are so many Vishnus. There are 24 different kinds of Vishnus, which I'll talk about later. Lord Vishnu is the one who generates innumerable universes from his body. So he is the primary cause of Mahatattva through Mahavishnu. He is the original source of all incarnations. He bestows salvation about everyone he kills. In fact, anyone who is killed by Lord Narayan or Lord Vishnu is immediately liberated. So it's really beneficial to be killed by Lord Narayan or Lord Vishnu. And finally, Lord Narayan also has the ability to attract exalted persons who are satisfied in themselves. So these are 5 qualities that Lord Vishnu has. And what are the 4 qualities that only Lord Krishna has reserved exclusively for himself? And those are tied to the Madhurya Ras of Lord Krishna, Lila Madhurya, Bhakta Madhurya, Venu Madhurya, and Rupa Madhurya. As the name suggests, Lila Madhurya, the Lord is a performer of wonderful, lovely, and very sweet pastimes, whether they are in Gokul or Mathura or Vrindavan or Dwarka. The second Madhurya Ras is the Lord always descends and is always surrounded by his devotees. He's never alone. He's never alone. So Lord Krishna, whether he's in Vrindavan or whether he's in Vaikuntha, he's always surrounded by his devotees, which could be the gopis, which could be the goddesses of fortune, could be the queens of Dwarka, could be the gopas, could be so many different associates. He's always surrounded by his devotees. The third Madhurya, that Lord Krishna is known for playing very beautifully on his flute and enchanting all the living entities in the world through his flute playing. We do know that when the Lord plays his bansuri in Vrindavan, every single living entity is attracted to him, whether it's the fruits, it's the flowers, the animals, the birds, the living entities, everyone is attracted to the Lord when he plays his flute. And finally, one of the most interesting ones, as we are all aware, is exceptional beauty and opulence, which is completely beyond compare. That is Rupa Madhurya. In fact, there is an interesting mention that when the Lord looks at himself in the mirror, he's not able to understand how beautiful he is. And that is why one of the manifestation is to take the form of Radharani and understand how beautiful he is, which I'll just mention briefly later. So let's talk about all these 4 aspects of the Lord. He is the performer of wonderful varieties of pastimes. In fact, the pastimes of the Lord are so unlimited that even Ananta Shesh says that if he had 1,000,000 mouths, he would not be able to define all the qualities and the pastimes of the Lord. And it's very interesting that in each and every universe and each and every planet, there are always different pastimes going on in the Lord. For instance, Lord Nishingadev is currently killing Hiranyakashipu in some universal system, in some planet. And all these pastimes are not restricted to our universal system or our earthly planet. They are actually going on in so many different planetary systems. So whether it's playing with his brother, or playing with his gopis, or enjoying with his queens, Krishna is known for his absolutely wonderful variety of pastimes. And of course, I unfortunately will not have time to discuss all the pastimes, but since the time he was born, all his pastimes in Gokul, Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka completely reflect his sweetness, his power, his mischief, his humor, his cunning, his intelligence, and you name it. All these pastimes reflect different qualities of the Lord. And they're very, very sweet pastimes, which are really meant to enchant the living souls, the conditioned souls towards the Lord's lotus feet. So just to give you a little synopsis about the timeline of the Lord, we do know that he appeared in Dväpara Yuga in the month of Bhadra, about 3227 BC. And the word Krishna specifically denotes the dark part of the month. That means the moon was waning at that time. The Lord appeared in Mathura, but he was carried to Gokul because of the fear of Kansa. And in Gokul, he spent 3 years and 4 months of his initial lifetime. And then in Vrindavan and Nandgram, he spent equal number of years. And then at the age of 16, he left for Mathura because now it was time for him to kill the demons and essentially start taking on the role of a monarch or the king of Dwarka. But in Mathura, he stayed for 18 years and 4 months. And finally, towards the latter part of his life, he spent all his time in Dwarka until his disappearance at the age of 125 years. It is mentioned that at the time of Mahabharata, when the Lord spoke the Gita to Arjun, he was close to 90 years of age, but he looked exactly like a 16-year-old youth. That's because the Lord never ever ages. He's always youthful in his nature. The second aspect is the Lord is always surrounded by his devotees. It's very rare to find a single solo picture of the Lord. He's either with Radharani or he's playing with the Gopas. The solo pictures that we normally see are not of the absolute aspect of Lord Krishna. In fact, they are more of Lord Narayan, where we see Lord Narayan with his 4 hands holding his weapons and his conch and his flower. So Lord Narayan, of course, is represented sometimes as a single personality in pictures, but the Lord Krishna is never present as a single entity in his picture. He's always surrounded by his devotees, which actually is much more enchanting. So there are various kinds of devotees who are actually serving the Lord. And we do know there are 5 different relationships that one can have with the Lord in different rasas. It can be in the form of neutrality, known as Shantaras, or it could be in the mood of servant or servitorship, known as Dasyaras, could be in the mood of friendship, known as Sakyaras, could be in the mood of parental affection, Vatsalyaras, and finally, the highest ras is Madhurya ras, which is in the mood of a conjugal lover. So let's look at some of these examples, which entities fall in all these 5 categories. So when one worships Krishna in Shantaras, that is actually a worship in the mood of a passive state, where there is an emotion of neutrality. So the common entities which fall in this category who are serving Krishna in a passive mood are Krishna's cows, Krishna's flowers, the 4 Kumars, the 9 Yogendra, and the stick that the Krishna carries, the flute that he plays on, his bugle horn. All of these are serving the Lord in a passive mode. Of course, the 4 Kumaras are also present in a different category, but they are also placed in a passive state here as well. Then in the mood of servant, Srila Prabhupada has specifically mentioned 3 names, Chitraka, Patraka, and Raktaka. These are the 3 personal servants of the Lord who are always serving him for his personal needs. So they are actively engaged in serving the Lord. Of course, all of us are the servants of the Lord, but Prabhupada specifically mentions these 3 individuals. Then in the mood of friendship, Krishna has so many different friends, all the Gopa boys, but the 2 predominant names that come particularly in mind are Shri Dham and Sudama. And of course, Arjun was also Lord Krishna's very, very dear friend. Then, of course, Vatsalya Ras is parental affection. We do know Devaki, Vasudev, Nand Baba, Yashoda, Prishni, Sutapa, Aditi, and Kashyap. This is all in the mood of parental affection. And finally, the topmost Ras is that of conjugal lover, and that is only exclusively meant for Srimati Radharani, because she is the topmost devotee of the Lord who has nothing but pure love for the Lord. And all these are coming from teachings of Lord Chaitanya, where Lord Chaitanya has extensively described these 5 relationships in his book. All right, the third aspect that Krishna has, which is very enchanting, is that he is known for playing his flute, which is commonly known as Bansuri. And if I were to ask you a question, how many different kinds of flute does Krishna play? Does anyone have an answer here at this point? You can either put in the chat later, but this is very interesting because when I read more on books which are written by Srila Prabhupada's disciples and of course via our acharyas, it came as a huge surprise to me that Krishna has actually 6 different types of flutes. It's very interesting. And all these 6 have different functions to perform. For instance, the Venu is a small flute. It's the smallest. It's only 6 inches long, and it has 6 holes. And Krishna plays the Venu sometimes, depending on his mood. Then the Murli is the longest, and the Murli has 4 holes at the end, and Krishna plays this at certain times too. The Vanshi is the second longest, and Vanshi is the one which is decorated extensively with wonderful jewels. Then there is a beautiful flute known as Sammohini or Mahananda, which is extensively decorated with jewels also. Then there is Akarshini, which is longer than Sammohini and made up of gold, exclusive gold. And finally, Krishna's favorite flute that he plays to attract the cowherd damsels in Vrindavan is Anandini or Vanshuli, which is mostly liked by Vrajagopa. That's the one that he uses particularly for his pastimes in Vrindavan. And I'm not going to read the slide. It's a pretty busy slide, but just to show you how technical the Lord is, there are 6 different kinds of flutes and there are 8 different tunes. So you can imagine a combination of 48 different tunes that the Lord can play on the 6 of his flutes. So the first note is meant for disrupting the meditation of Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. And when the Lord plays the first note, Ananta Dev gets very blissful and very happy and joyful, and he starts swaying his head because he's in the shape of a snake. So you can imagine Ananta swaying his head when the Lord is playing his first note, I'm sorry. When he plays the second note, that's when Mother Yamuna becomes extremely joyful. In fact, in her joy, she starts flowing backward when the Lord plays the second note. When he plays the third note, the moon stops moving because the moon becomes completely stunned. When he plays the fourth note, the cows start running to Krishna and they also get stunned. And it is mentioned extensively that the most appropriate note to attract the gopis and Radharani towards him is the 5th note. And the 5th note is the one that the Lord plays exclusively during the Rasa Leela to attract the gopis for the Rasa dance. The 6th note is so beautiful that even the stones melt when they hear the 6th note. The 7th note is played when all the different seasons are meant to be manifested. And of course, the last note, which is very private, is only meant for Srimati Radharani. The Lord plays the 8th note only when he wants to be alone with Srimati Radharani. The 4th exclusive quality of Lord is that he has beauty beyond compare. And as I mentioned earlier, one simply has to look at the different deity forms that we have in the temples to really understand how lovely the Lord is. The beauty is extensively described in so many books, but I've been able to capture a bit of a summary from Brahma Samhita. The Lord's body is blue like a new cloud. He has eyes which resemble lotus petals. His face is enhanced by his earrings and the peacock feather that he always wears on his head. He also has a jewel around his neck known as Kaustubha Jewel. His clothes are like brilliant lightning. He's always youthful looking. He loves to wear garlands which are made from wild forest flowers. And of course, while he's in Vrindavan, not in Dwarka, while in Vrindavan, he's always holding a herding stick, a buffalo horn, and a flute. And this is very nicely described in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10. So one can see these images just to give you a little bit of a meditation on the Lord. You can look at these beautiful pictures that artists have painted and really meditate on the beauty and the form of the Lord. One can see the color. His bodily color is neither black nor blue. In fact, it is the bluish tinge of a new rain cloud. And that's really hard to define. And that's why one can see that this color is not present in the material world. This is a very interesting color that the Lord has. And this is clearly mentioned in Mukundamala Stotra also. And of course, his body is very soft. And the softness of a body is actually the sign of a great personality. And of course, the Lord loves to eat butter. A lot of people say the Lord's body is as soft as butter, but rather we should be saying the opposite statement. The butter is as soft as the Lord's body. because Krishna is the origin of all softness also. Then, of course, his eyes are absolutely stunning. They are like lotus petals. And if you get a chance, please do read Sri Krishna Karnamrita by Srila Bilvamangal Thakur. He has described Krishna's beauty and his eyes so beautifully in his book. He's given a vivid description of how Krishna's eyes actually look. He's described it very nicely. If you get a chance, please read that book. Then, of course, Krishna's face is enhanced by his lovely shark-shaped earrings he wears, and then he's always decorated with a peacock feather, and there is a history behind that too. So Krishna looks stunning because of all these ornamentation that he has either on his face directly or on his turbans, which enhances his beauty even much more. Then, of course, he wears a very specific jewel known as Kaustubha Jewel, which was actually originated from the churning of the ocean of milk. Essentially, when there was a fight between the demons and the demigods, and there was a churning of the ocean, that's when Kaustubha Jewel was actually extracted from there. And that Kaustubha Jewel is actually worn by the Lord around his neck. And the jewel itself has a tiny engraving of a beautiful calf on it. So as I mentioned here, the Kaustubha jewel is very specific. It's only worn by Krishna or Lord Vishnu. And this is one of the 14 treasures that emerged from the churning of the ocean. And it is said that this jewel brings about a lot of fortune as well as luxuries, and it increases the beauty of the wearer. So the Lord has exclusively kept this jewel for himself. Then, of course, we all know that whether the Lord is 90 years of age or 125 years of age, he does not look anything older than 16 years of age. He is always youthful looking, and he's always lovely and fresh and youthful. And of course, his garments, it is described that his garments are like brilliant lightning. So one would assume the lightning has a color of a silver or white, but of course, Krishna can wear every color. His favorite color, his dhoti, is always in yellow, but it is described by our acharyas in the books that his garments are like brilliant lightning. And Krishna loves to be decorated with flowers. In our temples, one can see how beautifully the dressers decorate the deities with so many flowers. Particularly, Krishna likes to wear Vaijayanti Mala, and Vaijayanti Mala is known for being very unique because it is made up of 5 different kinds of flowers. I don't have the names of those 5 flowers, but essentially the Lord loves to wear flowers in his hair, on his feet, on his wrist, as well as in his neck. And he loves to wear garlands which actually touch his knees. He likes long garlands. Finally, he always carries a flute, a buffalo horn whenever he's herding his cows, and he's also carrying a herding stick. And please do remember, these elements are specifically meant for Vrindavan. He does not carry a flute or an herding stick or a buffalo horn in his Dwarka pastimes. In Dwarka, he's in a mood of Aishwarya, while in Vrindavan, it's mostly in Madhurya Ras. So Krishna's lotus feet, we all do know, we have studied these extensively, that Krishna's lotus feet, the bottom of his lotus feet, whether it's the right foot or the left foot, they have very specific symbols on them. And that's how one can recognize who is a Supreme Personality of Godhead. These unique symbols are only found at the base of Krishna's lotus feet. And of course, Radharani also has some of these symbols on her lotus feet as well. In fact, Krishna's beauty is so beautiful, it is mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, quote, Lord Krishna's sweetness is so attractive that it steals away his own mind and it makes him want to embrace himself. And this is a beautiful painting by one of our ISKCON artists, where Krishna is stunned by looking at his own reflection on the floor, and he wants to know, he wants to understand how beautiful he is. He's not able to fathom how beautiful it is, and that is why it is mentioned in Lalita Madhav 834, quote, that upon seeing his own picture, Krishna lamented, how glorious this picture is. It is attracting me just as it attracts Radharani. This is such a sweet pastime of the Lord that when he looks at himself, he's not able to fathom his beauty. And that is why this is one of the reasons he desires to take the form of Sri Radharani, since Radharani is able to see his form in front of her. This is one of the reasons he wants to understand. And now if we can go a bit more technical, because Krishna's beauty is described in so many different places by our acharyas. There are so many technicalities with regard to the beauty of the Lord. It is mentioned that there are 7 places that Krishna has a reddish luster, such as his eyes are red, his palms, his soles, his inner part of his mouth, his lips, his tongue, and his nails. They are all reddish in color. Then Krishna has a broad outlook in 3 places. His waist is broad, his forehead is broad, and his chest is also broad. Then he's short in 3 places, such as the neck and his thighs and his genitals. Then 3 places, he has a lot of depth. His voice is very deep, his navel is very deep, and of course, his intelligence is also very deep. Then his 5 areas are very high in nature: his nose, his arms, his ears, forehead, and thighs. And finally, there are 5 elements which are extremely fine in feature. His skin is very fine, his hair, his bodily hair, his teeth, and his fingertips are all very fine. In fact, this actually reminds me of the deity of Shri Radha Raman. For those of you who have looked at Sri Radha Raman very carefully, it's a very unique deity because one can clearly see the teeth of the Lord. If you really go close up on the image of Radha Ramanji, you can actually see that his teeth have been carved, and that shows how fine his teeth are and his features are. So let me just check the time because I don't want to take too much time here. Okay, so we have about 20-25 minutes. I'm going to move on to the 3rd section of my talk, which is incarnations. And this lifetime is not enough to talk about the Lord's incarnations, but I'll try to do the best I can with his most predominant ones. So just to give you a little bit more technicality, the characteristics of any incarnation are understood by 2 features Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in teachings of Lord Chaitanya. There are 2 features, the principal feature and the marginal feature. The principal feature is also known as Param Satyam, the supreme truth. And this feature is basically describing the personality and the body of the Lord. The second feature is known as the marginal feature, which basically describes the activities of the Lord. And anyone who is endowed with the marginal feature only exhibits occasional feature of the Param Satyam. And we're also going to talk about the avatar. We use the word avatar for incarnation, but the true definition of avatar means one who has descended from the spiritual sky. That's exactly the definition of avatar. And Lord Chaitanya exclusively talks a lot about the avatars in the teaching of Lord Chaitanya in chapter 8. It's a very interesting chapter. Right, so there are 3 features of manifestation. One is the Svayam-Rupa. The second is the Tad Ekatma-Rupa. The third is the Avesha-Rupa. So what are the difference between all these 3? The Svayam-Rupa is the personal form of the Lord. And through the Svayam-Rupa, one can understand Krishna directly as he is. So the Svayam-Rupa is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternally present in Goloka, and he never ever leaves Vrindavan. That is the Svayam-Rupa. Then the second one is the Tad Ekatma-Rupa. And this is the form which actually does resemble the Svayam-Rupa, but some of the bodily features are quite distinct from the Svayam-Rupa. And I'll give you some examples later. So Srila Prabhupada writes that Tad Ekatma-Rupa is simultaneously similar and different from the Svayam-Rupa. And finally, the third one is the Avesha-Rupa. Avesha-Rupa is where Krishna empowers the living entities to represent him, such as the Shakti-Avesh avatar. So let's look at all of these 3 with some examples. As I mentioned earlier, the Svayam-Rupa is the original form of the Lord, and the Svayam-Rupa is only designated to one person, Krishna himself as the absolute truth. And the Svayam-Rupa is the source of everything, whether it's material or spiritual, whether we are talking about impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma, the Svayam-Rupa is the origin of everything that we are talking about. The Tat Ekatma Rupa actually encompasses all the expansions and incarnations of the Lord. And they are unlimited in number. We talk a lot about the Dash avatars, and there's so many different kinds of Vishnus, but that is just a drop in the ocean. The incarnations and the expansions of the Lord are totally unlimited in number. And what are the differences between expansion and incarnation? A very clear definition is given that the expansion refers to the form which is residing in the spiritual world, while the word incarnation is used for a form who comes to the material world. That is the very big subtle difference between an expansion and an incarnation. So the Tat Ekatma Rupa, those forms possess some of the qualities that the Lord has, only some, not all of them. And they actually do look like Krishna because their bodily features and emotions also resemble those of Krishna, but not in full absolute nature, but some of them. And essentially, they are meant for carrying out very specific activities. And based on the activities that they carry out, they are named very uniquely based on those characteristics, which I will also mention a bit later. The third is the Avesha Rupa, and this is something that we all understand because we use the word Shaktivesh Avatar very commonly. And these are very unique servants of the Lord who are either empowered with knowledge or with strength. And they are empowered so much that they can almost act like God. But do remember, they're not God, but they almost act like God in carrying out very specific duties or specific functions for which they are sent to this world. And most of the Shaktivesh avatars are jivas. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them are jivas. And they are further divided into three divisions: the Bhagavat Avesh, the Shakti Avesh, and Vibhuti. The Bhagavat Avesh are the ones who are completely in divinity. That means they are always in divine absorption. The Shakti Avesh avatar are directly empowered by the Lord, and Vibhuti are indirectly empowered by the Lord. So no matter which Avesh we talked about, all of them are getting their powers from the Lord himself. They are not capable of doing something on their own. All the powers are coming from the Lord. Although we give credit to them that these are wonderful, very elevated personalities, they are elevated, but they are getting all their power from the Lord himself. So this is just a synopsis. These two slides that I'm going to show you, again, they are very technical. We talk about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom comes the Svayam-Rupa, which always remains in Vrindavan, and the Svayam-Prakash. And from the Svayam-Prakash, we have two expansions known as Prabhav as well as Vaibhav. Prabhav are the various forms that the Lord manifests, either those forms that he manifested in Dväpara in order to be with each and every queen in each and every palace. That's a Prabhav form. Or when the Lord expands himself in multiple forms to be with each and every gopi, making each gopi think that Krishna is exclusively with herself, that is a Prabhav form. The Vaibhav form is directly Lord Balaram himself. And of course, we talk about Lord Balaram. What comes from Lord Balaram? In fact, everything comes from Lord Balaram. The Vilas and the Swansha, they're all coming from Lord Balaram. If we look at the Vilas forms, there are the four-armed Vishnu forms who reside in Vaikuntha. The first quadruple expansion, as well as the second quadruple expansions, they're all coming from Lord Balaram in his Vilas feature. Then Lord Balaram's Swansha features are partial manifestations, and in these are 6 categories of incarnations, which we are all very familiar with: the Lila avatars, Purusa avatar, Guna avatar, Shaktivesh avatar, Manmantra avatar, as well as Yuga avatar. So this is just a sort of a summary which shows you how Lord Balaram is the first expansion, from whom comes the first Chaturvyuha, encompassing Vasudev, Shankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anuruddha, from whom come the 24 forms of Vishnu. Then the second Chaturbhyaha, from whom come the Mahasankarshan and Mahavishnu. So the whole point I'm trying to show here is this is completely beyond our comprehension. This whole creation and the Lord's activities and the Lord's forms, even if we try to understand all this with our tiny brains, it's really absolutely fantastic how systematically and how beautifully everything is arranged. Nothing is happening by chance. Krishna has arranged everything in a very scientific manner and designated duties for each and every one of these expansions or incarnations. So the first quadruple expansion, as I mentioned, is Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anuruddha. And it is mentioned that these four forms are always residing in Mathura and Dwarka, not in Vrindavan. They are always in Mathura and Dwarka. And Lord Narayan expands from Sankarshan of the first quadruple expansion. And all these four in the quadruple have their specific functions. For instance, Sankarshan is the predominating deity of all of us, the Jivas. He's the predominating deity. Vasudev is the supreme cause of all causes. That's why we worship Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We always refer, he's the cause of all causes. Pradyumna is the predominating deity of the mind, controls the mind, and Aniruddha is the predominating deity of the ego. And of course, all these four, from all these four, there are various further expansions such as Trivikrama, Vamandev, Narasingha, Janardhan, Hrishikesh, Hari, Damodar, Padmanabha. They are all coming from these four forms from the quadruple expansion. Then, of course, from the quadruple expansion, we also have the 24 forms of Lord Vishnu. And depending on how the four elements are arranged on Lord Vishnu's hands, the conch, the disc, the lotus, and the club, we name the four Narayan forms differently. And they're all residing in the heavenly planets known as the spiritual planets known as the Vaikuntha planets. Then, of course, the second quadruple expansion is also Vasudev, Mahasankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anuruddha, and they're all coming from Lord Narayan. So Lord Narayan is in the center of all these quadruple expansions. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the 6 Svamsa Incarnations, as I mentioned briefly earlier: the Purush, the Guna, the Yuga, Lila, Shaktivesh, and Manvantara. So Purush avatars are the incarnations of Lord Vishnu. The Guna avatars are the incarnations that control the modes of nature, whether it's Rajasic, Tamasic, or Sattvic. The Yuga avatars coming during the different yugas: Satya Yuga, Treta, Dväpara, and Kali Yuga. Lila avatars are always present in going on 24/7, different kinds of pastimes. Shaktivesh avatar are the ones who are specifically empowered either directly or indirectly by the Lord to perform very specific functions. And then finally, Manvantara avatar, who are the incarnations in a specific lifetime of Manu. So let's look at the Purush avatars. There are 3 here: the Mahavishnu, also known as Karanodakshaya Vishnu, who is the primary cause of Mahatattva and the entire creation. He is generating all the universes as he breathes, and as all the universes are coming out from the pores of his body. And then Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the one who enters each and every of these universal system. And Shirodakshaya is the one who is present in every super soul as the Paramatma. So one can see progressively we move from Mahavishnu to Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and then Shirodakshaya Vishnu, which is very nicely defined in Satvata Tantra. So these are some images which shows you this is Karanodakshaya Vishnu, who is lying on the causal ocean. And as he inhales and exhales, that's when the universes are manifested or unmanifested. The Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the one who is lying in the Garbhodaka or Garbha ocean, and he is lying on the Ananta ocean. He's lying on the bed of Ananta Shesh. And it is frequently seen that Mother Lakshmi is always massaging his feet. This is a very common picture that we see. And Garbhodakshaya Vishnu actually enters all the universes and creates all the diversities in them. And it is through the stem which came out of the navel, the lotus stem that came out from the navel of the Lord, which is the origin of Lord Brahma. It's from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And finally, Kshirodakshay Vishnu is present as the super soul in each and every living entity. Then the second incarnation is the Guna Incarnation. We have Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. Brahma is dictating the mode of passion, Lord Vishnu dictating the mode of goodness, and of course Shima is the mode of ignorance. Lord Brahma represents a Jiva Tattva. We have to remember that at the end of Kali Yuga and the end of the whole cycle of creation, all the planets where the Jivas are residing, everything is going to be annihilated. Even Lord Brahma's planet is going to be annihilated. It is mentioned here. And then another person will take the post of Lord Brahma. So it is very interesting that all these posts, whether it's Indra, Chandra, Agni, these are actually posts, and different individuals can actually occupy these posts. So Lord Brahma's post can also be occupied by another individual after a devastation has occurred. And Lord Vishnu, of course, is representing the mode of goodness, and he's the Vishnu Tattva in this trinity. And Lord Mahesh, or Lord Shiva, has his own Tattva known as Shiva Tattva, and he is responsible for keeping everyone in the mode of ignorance or tamasic. Then the third incarnation is the Yuga avatars. We do know that there are 4 yugas: Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dväpara, and Kali Yuga. It is mentioned that in Satya Yuga, the Lord incarnates in a white form, Shukla. In Treta Yuga, he is reddish in color, Rakta. In Dväpara Yuga, he is Shama, blackish in color, which was just 5,000 years ago. And in Kali Yuga, it is also mentioned that he's blackish. Probably that's the color of Kalki, who is yet to come. But it is also mentioned that he's sometimes golden in color, because that is a concealed form of the Lord, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So typically the Lord is referred to as Tri Yuga rather than Chatur Yuga, because in Kali Yuga, he does not descend directly in his form. He is actually coming in the form of his devotee as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a Chinna avatar, which means concealed form. So it is mentioned that in the Dväpara Yuga, people generally worship the Supreme Lord Krishna by chanting the following hymn: Namaste Vasudevaya, Namah Shankarshanaya, Pradyumna Aniruddhaya, Tobhyam Bhagavate Namaha. Let me offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the forms of Vasudev, Shankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. This is how they worship the Lord in Dväpara Yuga. But in Kali Yuga, it is we worship Lord Chaitanya as follows: Krishna Varanam Tvisha Krishnam Sango Pangastra Parshadam Yagai Sankirtana Prayar Yajanti Hisu Medisha. In the age of Kali, the Lord incarnates as a devotee and is always chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Although he is Krishna, his complexion is not blackish like Krishna's in Dväpara Yuga, but is golden. He always engages in preaching love of Godhead through the Sankirtan movement, and those who are intelligent adopt this process of self-realization. This is from Bhagavatam, Canto 11. So these are all the Yuga avatars. Then, of course, the Shaktivesh incarnations are unlimited, and they are predominantly 2 kinds: those who are Bhagavat Avesh and those who are Shaktivesh. The Bhagavat Avesh are completely absorbed in divinity, such as Kapil Dev and Rishabh Dev, while the others are empowered either directly or indirectly as Shaktivesh avatars. So Shaktivesh avatars are further divided into 2 categories: Sakshat and Avesh. Sakshat forms are those forms when the Lord himself comes, and the 2 very common examples of the Sakshat forms are Shesh, who is directly responsible for serving the Lord, and Ananta, who is also responsible for serving the Lord, but Ananta is also maintaining all the planets on his hood in the form of a snake. And then the Avesh are the forms such as the 4 Kumaras, Narad Muni, Prithu Maharaj, Parashuram, Lord Brahma, Shiva, Lord Buddha. These are all Avesh forms who have been specifically empowered by the Lord, either directly or indirectly, to perform certain functions. For instance, Lord Brahma is meant to perform the function of creation. So that means he is a Shaktivesh avatar in this case. So Sheshanag is known as the Sevana Shakti, because he's serving as a bed for the Lord on which the Lord rests, and Mother Lakshmi is performing his massage. Then Ananta is known as Bhudharan Shakti because he is empowered to bear all the planets on his hoods. He's actually controlling the entire universal system. We can call the law of gravity, we can call the earth has magnetic fields, no matter what, but everything is actually being controlled by Anantadev himself. If Anantadev does not control the planetary systems on his hoods, the entire creation will actually collapse because he's maintaining the entire balance. Then the 4 Kumars represent the Jnana Shakti, because we do know the wonderful story that the 4 Kumars were initially impersonalists, but after smelling the fragrance of the tulsi leaves, which are offered at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, they immediately became personalists and they came to be known as the Jnana Shakti. Then Narad Muni, we all know Narad Muni is such a wonderful devotee of the Lord. So he represents Bhakti Shakti, and he is distributing Bhakti throughout all the universal systems that he is traveling. It is mentioned that Narad Muni does not stay in a place for very long. He travels all over the planetary system with this veena, always glorifying the Lord Narayan, Narayan, and he's inducing everyone to chant the names of Lord Narayan. Then we have Srishti Shakti. Srishti means creation. Lord Brahma has been specifically empowered with the energy to create all the cosmos. But one has to remember, Lord Brahma is only the secondary cause. The primary cause is Lord Krishna. But of course, Lord Krishna is very remote and very aloof. He's enjoying himself in Goloka, and he's designated all these tasks to Lord Brahma to do the creation. Then Prithu Maharaj is the Palana Shakti. Prithu Maharaj is a very exalted devotee. He has the power, and he's been blessed with the power for maintaining the living entities. We do know the glorious qualities of Prithu Maharaj, so he is known as one endowed with Palana Shakti. Parashuram has been endowed with Dushta Damana Shakti because he has the power for killing the evil elements. In this case, decimating the Kshatriyas, the evil Kshatriyas, 21 different times using his weapon. And of course, then we move on to Lila Incarnations. We know that there are so many Lila avatars of the Lord. It is mentioned that there are 25 Lila avatars in one day of Lord Brahma. And we all know Lord Brahma lives for a very, very long time, a kalpa. And the Lila avatars are very large in number. So just to give you an idea, it is also important to remember that some of these Lila avatars, some of these avatars simultaneously form in 2 different categories, such as Shaktivesh avatar or Lila avatars. For instance, the 4 Kumars also fall in Lila avatar category. We have Narad Muni also falling in this category. He's the son of Lord Brahma because he's empowered with devotional service. We have Varahadev, who appeared for a very specific role to fight with Hiranyaksha. We have Matsya avatar, who had a very important role to show mercy to Satyavrata Muni and save all the Vedas. Then we have the Lila avatar of Yakya, who is the son of Prajapati Ruchi and Akuti, and he took the post of Indra when there was no qualified person to take on that particular post. So these are all Lila avatars. Narayan Rishi, a Lila avatar, who represents the Lord's quality of renunciation, Narayan Rishi. Then we have Kapiladev, who is the son of Kardama Muni and Mother Devahuti, and he's the original propounder of Sankhya philosophy, not the atheistic Sankhya philosophy, but the original Sankhya philosophy. Then we also have the son of Atri Muni and Anasuya, who is the combined incarnation known as Dattatreya of Lord Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. He is the combined incarnation, again, Lila avatar. Then we have Hayagriva, who was responsible for saving the Vedas from the planetary system known as Rasatala, and he came out in the form of a horse. Then we have Hansa, who is in the form of a swan, and he was responsible for answering the questions which were put forward by Lord Brahma's sons. And we also have Prishni Garbha, and it's very interesting that Prishni Garbha is the form who actually appeared in front of Dhruv Maharaj. And he was the one who actually bestowed the planet Dhruva Loka to Dhruv Maharaj. That specific form is known as Prishni Garbha. We also have Prithu Maharaj, who is the incarnation of the Lord's ruling force. As I mentioned earlier, Prithu Maharaj is known for his very compassionate and kind nature. Then, of course, one of our favorites is Lord Narasimha Dev, who came exclusively to save his devotee and also to kill Hiranyakashipu. We also have Kurma Dev, who was very instrumental in fulfilling the pastimes of the churning of the ocean of milk to get the nectar, which could be divided between the demons and demigods. We also have Dhanvantri, who is the original cause of Ayurveda. He's the one who emerged from the ocean of milk, carrying a pot of nectar, which was predominantly used by the demigods. We also have Mohini Murti, the Lord's very stunning and lovely form, in the form of a beautiful woman. The Lord specifically came as Mohini Murti to bewilder the demons so that most of the nectar could be given to the demigods. But unfortunately, Rahu actually disguised himself as a demigod, and he came and sat on the sides of the sun and the moon planet, disguising himself as a demigod. And it is mentioned that Rahu actually got a few drops of the nectar. And when the Lord threw his Sudarshan Chakra towards Rahu, it actually sort of like slashed his head from his body, and his body died because the body had not received the nectar, but his mouth had already received the nectar. So Rahu's mouth, his whole head, is actually immortal. And even today we say that the eclipses that happen, whether it's a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, is happening because Rahu is actually overshadowing the planets of sun and moon. And that was because the Rahu actually got a few drops of the nectar. So his head turned out to be immortal. Then, of course, a very, very important incarnation, Vaman Dev, who came specifically to bestow his mercy on Bali Maharaj, and he's the son of Kashyapa Muni and Aditi, also known as Upendra. Then Parashuram Brigupati came as the son of Jamadagni and Renuka, and essentially to get rid of the Kshatriyas. We also have Ramachandra. He came to show what a very unique and the perfect human being. He came in the form of a human. He's not a human, but just to show the human beings what a perfect king should actually look like, how a perfect human being should behave, Lord Ramachandra. And we have Vyasadev, who came specifically to divide the Vedas into several branches. We do know he's the son of Parashar Muni and Mother Satyavati, Veda Vyas. We have Lord Balaram, who is the first plenary expansion of the Lord. And of course, Lord Balaram is identical to Lord Krishna. There's no difference except for the complexion. He's whitish in color, while Lord Krishna is blackish in color. And of course, the original form, Lord Krishna, Swayam Bhagwan, the absolute personality of Godhead. And Buddha is coming for a very specific purpose to show empathy and love and kindness. He appeared to stop animal slaughter, which was going on extensively at that time in the name of Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. And he came exclusively to actually misguide the people also, taking them to the path of atheism and impersonalism. But he is actually one of the Dashavatars, an incarnation of the Lord. But again, he came for a very specific purpose. And the one which is yet to come, the last one, is Kalki Avatar. And it is described in Srimad Bhagavatam very clearly that he will be born as the son of a Brahmin whose name would be Vishnu Vyas, and he would appear in a village known as Sambhala, and he would come on a white horse and he would kill all the degraded human beings. And once the Kali Yuga is completely ended as a result of Kalki coming here, then the new cycle will begin and Satya Yuga would start all over. So finally, Manvantara Avatar, just I'm going to go through this really quickly since we are short on time here. Manvantara Avatar typically come during each cycle of Manu. And currently the present Manu that we are in right now is the son of Vivasvan, known as Vaivasvata Manu, and he is the 7th in line. So there are various incarnations that also come during Manvantara Avatar. It is mentioned here that Krishna himself, in his original form of Golok, descends only once in the day of Brahma, and that just happened to be about 5,000 years ago, which is very, very recent compared to Lord Brahma's age and his time. So Lord Brahma lives for 300 trillion years, And it is mentioned that Lord Krishna appears only once in the day of Lord Brahma. That means Lord Krishna appears only once every 8.6 billion years. So what to speak of 8.6 billion years? 5,000 years is really small when we compare it to 8.6 billion years. So we're very fortunate that Krishna just appeared 5,000 years ago. So just to end my presentation, this is just a synopsis of the Dashavatars that most of us are very familiar with. But I hope I've been able to show you that Krishna has unlimited incarnations. His beauty is beyond compare. His pastimes are unlimited, and his opulences are completely unlimited. So no matter how hard we try to understand, to gain knowledge about Krishna, we are so small. What to speak of Ananta Shesh, who himself cannot glorify the Lord himself. So we are just a speck of dust in this planetary system, who are taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. And by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we are actually able to get that nectar, the nectar of his sweet pastimes, the nectar of his beauty, the nectar of his incarnation. And we should really hold on to that nectar and never let it go, because it's a great fortune to be able to really read about the Lord like this and really meditate on his forms and his incarnations. So I will end my talk here. And I'm very grateful to you for your time and your attention. I got this knowledge from Srila Prabhupada's books, the Bhagavatam, Nectar of Devotion, CC, Brahma Samhita, as well as various websites which are written by the ISKCON devotees. So thank you so much for your kind attention. I'm going to stop sharing my slideshow. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for a wonderful presentation. Very fine details, actually. And so if you have time, we can have some questions. So
I have the time, but I don't know if everybody has the time. And I try to answer. I'm not an expert. I've been reading a lot of books.
Yeah. So before, I would like to give just a quick update on our upcoming programs. Is that okay? Just 2 minutes?
Sure.
Okay. So can everyone see my screen? Okay. So for the upcoming program, we have on Wednesday, the class given by His Grace Ramchandra Prabhu, and the topic will be on pastimes of Lord Jagannath. And on Sunday, we have a class by His Grace Ram Sharan Prabhu, and the topic is why is life problematic and how to discover real happiness. And every Thursday, we have a children's storytelling time, 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. And Friday, we have Bhakti Vriksha programs. And Sunday, we have a Sunday school starting 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And during the weekdays, we have from Monday to Friday, we have the reading of the Bhagavad Gita for 15 minutes, 12 p.m. to 12:15. And daily we have a japa sessions. So please take advantage of these virtual programs and enlighten yourself. Thank you. So we can have questions. So Shraddha Mataji, yeah, you can go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Very, very enlightening, but very charming at the same time. Mataji, I have a couple of questions and a comment. I guess I'll start with the comment first, that you mentioned that how Lord Buddha was born to show compassion to people, and he wanted to stop animal killing. But every Thai restaurant that you visit, there is the picture of Lord Buddha, and they're serving all sorts of living entities right in front of his picture, which I found very, very, I don't know, Kali Yuga maybe. So Mataji, my first question would be that you mentioned that Vibhuti is indirectly empowered. How do I understand indirectly empowered? Because everything comes from the Lord. So, and if you have an example for me understand.
Sure. that's an example which is going to be really hard to find because, or rather to really express right now, because there's so much overlapping, like I mentioned, between Vilas and Prabhav and Vaibhav and all these avatars. There's so much overlap. For instance, Narad Muni falls in so many different categories. So when it says directly empowered or indirectly empowered is where Krishna takes a personal interest and he's personally empowering them, whereas indirectly empowered is where Krishna's original expansions and incarnations are directly empowering. So it's not coming directly from the absolute personality of Godhead, because, you know, what is Krishna's main job? Just to enjoy. He's Satchid Anand Vigraha. So in cases where he directly takes an interest, it's almost like talking about a president of the country where he's directly taking interest, that's direct empowerment. Whereas versus he designates some of his ministers, in this case known as the incarnations or expansions, particularly in the material world, they're known as incarnations, indirectly empowered. That's the way I've understood from the books that I've read. But Vibhuti is, I can't think of the name right now. I did remember this, but please forgive me, I'm not able to remember it right now. Because there's so many incarnations, one gets a bit confused where they all fall in which category.
Sure, Mataji. Okay. Mataji, my another question would be that every time we mention that Lord Krishna was 90 years of age when he spoke Bhagavad Gita, should it be surprising for us? Because when we say 90 years, we are thinking from Kali Yuga standard, where the lifespan is only 100 years. But Krishna came in Dväpara Yuga, where the lifespan was 1,000 years. So even if he was 90 in Dväpara, in our calculation, probably he'll be like 9 years or 10 years maybe. So
Correct.
Not that I'm saying that I don't believe in that he's ever youthful, which he is. But even if we go by the calculation of the ages, he was very young. And 125 years out of 1,000 years that the lifespan was, he left very early. So yeah, so his picture probably supposed to be young, and should we be so surprised? That's what I would just want to say.
But Krishna, whether he's 125 or 1,025,000, he never ages. In fact, Srila Prabhupada has written in his books extensively, he's always a 16-year-old youth, always. And of course, when we talk about Gokul and Mathura pastimes, we see him crawling in the courtyard of Nand Baba. That's different. But when he reaches the age, particularly the youthful age, that's when he never ever ages. In fact, even in Dwarka, he looks like a 16-year-old. So it's kind of hard. This is why I mentioned that I guess we're so conditioned, I speak for myself, we're so conditioned to think of age in terms of bodily features. So when we say Krishna was 125 years, one would say that, oh, he must be really old looking, but he's never old looking. He always looks the way he looks in Golok Vrindavan, which is always youthful. And of course, Krishna, you know, if someone sees him as a cowherd boy with a peacock feather and his flute, he looks very different than what he looks in Dwarka, where he's completely opulent and he's wearing crowns and he has his, you know, his weapons or whatever they may be. But eventually the underlying principle is always youthful. So you bring up a very good point, because when we compare the duration of life in all the 4 yugas, of course, Kali Yuga is 100 years versus 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. So that's I would say, a mathematical intricacy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there is no contest to that he's ever youthful looking. But even in that terms, if we are to say that 90 years, I mean, for Dwapar Yuga, 90 years, he was like a boy, you know, I mean, if we do that calculation. So yes.
Correct.
So Mataji, one more thing. He never played flute in Dwarka.
As far as I've read, I've done a lot of research in here, and it seems like he used to, I mean, we know about the pastimes of, you know, Mother Subhadra guarding the door, and how Mother Rohini was talking about Krishna's pastimes, and, you know, Krishna and Balaram got big eyes. So based on what I've read, since that was more of Aishwarya Bhav and Vrindavan was Madhurya Bhav, Krishna did not carry his flute in Dwarka. He did not play his flute in Dwarka because the flute was meant exclusively for Vrindavan, for enchanting the cowherd, you know, his friends. But again, we do know that Krishna used to utter the name of Radharani in Dwarka also. And that's why the whole pastimes of, Krishna and Balaram having big eyes and all that. So I don't want to say yes and no at this point until, I've read more books, but based on the research I've done so far, there is no mention that he would be actually playing the flute in Dwarka.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Once again, wonderful class. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for your words.
Next question by Chaturika Sakhi Mataji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you for a wonderful class again and again. You said that there are unlimited pastimes. Why do we always repeat the same ones?
I think of three reasons, the same ones. Number one, they are extensively talked about in Srila Prabhupada's books. Number two, they are very charming and they reflect the 6 opulences of the Lord. And number three, because we identify these pastimes with the pictures that we are exposed to, like such as the artists who have, painted all these wonderful things. We look at those paintings and we immediately meditate on those pastimes. But like pastimes Hayagriva, pastimes of Nar-Narayan Rishi, they're really not talked about very often. So one really has to look into the Shastras to read about these pastimes. And like I said, Dash Avatar, there's so many unlimited avatars, but we exclusively talk a lot about the Dash Avatars of the Lord. So Chaturika, yes, they're unlimited pastimes, and it'll be really nice if we read Bhagavatam very carefully, because those describe the wonderful, forms of the Lord, like Rishabdev, Prithu Maharaj, so many different forms, and we can meditate on those pastimes. But for me personally, I would say when I look at a picture or a painting, that reflects a pastime, and Srila Prabhupada's Krishna book talks about pastimes which are very, I would say, sweet and enchanting. Those pastimes appeal to the heart a lot. At least that's human nature, something which is very sweet, we get attracted to it much more, like Krishna eating the dirt, or Damodar Lila, because it brings us so much joy, versus other pastimes where the Lord is trying to save the Vedas. That's more in a different mood. It's sweet in its own way, but it's not as sweet as the Vrindavan pastimes. But unlimited.
Mataji, there is a question in the chat box. In which category is Durga or Maya Devi? Is it Jiva Tattva, Shiva Tattva, or Vishnu Tattva?
Durga is actually Jiva Tattva. Durga Devi is exclusively Jiva Tattva. Like Lord Brahma, Agni Dev, all the demigods are Jiva Tattva. Lord Shiva, although he's called a demigod, he's neither Jiva Tattva nor Vishnu Tattva. Lord Shiva's position is very unique. He has his own Tattva known as Shiva Tattva, but Durga Devi is whether Mother Amba, Kali Mata, anybody, the different forms, they are all Jiva Tattva.
Okay. Thank you, Mataji. And one more question I had is, what are the 9 yogendras you had mentioned in the relationship, the passive relationship? So I have never heard.
Yeah, actually, I have the names of the 9 yogendras. I'll be more than happy to send you those names. I don't have them handy right now. I have it in another presentation, but I can write those for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mataji.
Sure.
And devotees, if anyone has, okay, Madhav.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna,
Just
Madhav.
based off the recent point you just made. So Maya is Jiva Tattva, but then does that mean that some Maya Devi is opposed? Because Maya Devi is above the modes of material nature.
Maya is responsible for the modes of material nature. Maya is that which is not, and Maya is responsible for the modes of material nature, but she's the secondary administrator. The primary administrator, of course, is Lord Krishna, but Krishna is the source of all these modes, but he never connects with these modes. He's completely aloof. And in the Gita, the example given is how a water which falls on a leaf of lotus is on the lotus leaf. The leaf is not attached to the water because there's no connection there, yet there is a connection. So Maya Devi or Durga Devi her main job is to keep the individual's living entity surrounded by these 3 modes of material nature indirectly through her Maya Shakti. And of course, one can say she's the wife of Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva is one of the controllers of the mode of ignorance. Then where does Lord Vishnu come? Because he's in charge of the mode of goodness. So everything is so intricately connected. But when we see these modes are created by Lord himself, but the administration of these modes is actually done by Durga. Through the characteristic coming from the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, through the characteristic, but she's responsible. So one example would be, we can think of like a jailer in a jail, and above the jailer is responsible for looking after all the inmates and making sure that they're doing everything that they're supposed to do. The jail is the material world and we are the prisoners, but the jailers is responsible to make sure that the inmates are not fighting with each other, or they sort of like, they're kept in the prison. But above the jailer, there is a head constable, or there is a, maybe a supervisor who are dictating to the jailer how to do all these things, and essentially making sure that these, it's sort of a bad example, but I hope I'm trying to get the point across, is these material modes of nature are being managed by Maya Devi. And her sole job is to keep us in Maya through these modes. That's her sole job.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mataji.
Srila Prabhupada also mentions there was a question raised. So we should aspire for the mode of goodness. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, we should actually transcend all these three material modes of nature, and we should aspire for Shuddha Sattva, which means pure mode of goodness. So even these mode of goodness is material in nature. So we have to transcend all these three modes eventually. But that's a very good question, Madhava.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? Okay. So Mataji, regarding this annihilation, when Lord Shiva, we have this universe where we have Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. And at the time of annihilation, as you mentioned, the Brahma will go away. And what happens to Lord Shiva? Shiva goes in the Kailasha, in the abode, in the spiritual sky? Or
I wish I could answer this question. I don't want to even guess, because that would be speculation. So the honest answer is I really don't know. But the one thing I do know is that the place, during annihilation, Shiva's planetary system, or wherever, Kailash or wherever he is, that does not get destroyed, because Shiva is not Jiva Tattva, and everything which is tied to Jiva, everything gets destroyed, including Lord Brahma's planet. So that's why it is very hard to understand the position of Lord Shiva, and exactly, he's such a great devotee of our Lord. He's Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu. So he's such a great devotee, but he has his own very unique position. And I have not read the Shiv Puran, but I'm sure there's a lot of information about Lord Shiva in these Purans. But right now, I'm still trying to complete Srimad Bhagavatam at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mataji. I see Soumya has a question. Soumya, unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. It was a wonderful class. Thank you. You answered like every single question in that whole slides. But I was wondering, why does Shiva represent ignorance, and why does Brahma represent passion? If they're such great devotees of Krishna, shouldn't they be like in full goodness?
But very, very excellent question. But they are empowered to perform certain duties. So Krishna has nothing to perform. Although he is the origin of everything, he has nothing to perform. So he has designated certain personalities to perform certain things. For instance, although they are great devotees of the Lord, we do know what happened to Lord Brahma in Vrindavan when he stole the cowherd boys and the calves and the cows. We do know that even Brahma, no offense to Lord Brahma, but he's a Jeev Tattva. So is he afflicted by the 4 defects that all of us have, tendency to cheat, illusion, mistakes, and imperfect senses? Yes, I would say yes, because he's a Jeev Tattva. And he could not recognize Krishna as the Supreme Lord in Vrindavan. So even Brahma gets deluded. Lord Shiva, who is known for being the supermost meditator and being a personality who is completely under control, he got deluded by Mohini Murthy. So even such exalted personalities who have designated duties to perform, we can say they are pure devotees of the Lord. They are devotees of the Lord. One can even say they are pure devotees of the Lord, but this nature is so finicky, and it is very, very easy to get really bewildered by the Lord's illusory energy. And they, both Lord Brahma, again, no offense to them, they're very exalted. They both got bewildered by the Lord's illusory energy as either Mohini Murthy or the Vrindavan past. In fact, Lord Brahma, he thought he was the only one in the whole creation. And then Lord Krishna says, which Brahma are you? And he says, which Brahma? I'm the only Brahma. And there were like millions of Brahma, right? With different heads coming. And so this shows that even Brahma and Shiva can get deluded by the Lord's potency. But in response to your question, they are designated for certain specific functions that they have to perform. And just the fact that we are conditioned immediately means we are surrounded by the modes of nature. And there has to be a personality controlling these modes, and hence the roles of Brahma and Shiva. And of course, Shiva's, we do know there are so many descendants of Shiva, like Shankaracharya, who is known for propounding impersonalism, is actually Lord Shiva's incarnation.
So like a follow-up question is, if they're getting affected by this already, if they're getting affected by these material modes, then how are they the ones that are controlling it as well for everyone else?
So I would not say that Lord Shiva is getting affected by the three modes of material nature, because his position is very exalted. But Krishna's energy is so diluting that they get diluted by Krishna's energy. Now, Krishna's energy, of course, we do know he has, the external energy and the marginal energy and the internal energy. So when Krishna comes himself as Mohini Murthy, that's not his external energy, that's his internal energy, that's his spiritual form. Mohini Murthy is not a material form. So the delusion was happening either through an internal energy or an external energy, and that can get pretty tricky to understand, because normally when we use the word delusion, we say, oh, it's coming from his external material energy, because that's where all the modes are operating. But Krishna's spiritual energy can also be diluting to these exalted souls. And in fact, Krishna had warned Lord Shiva that, are you sure you'll be able to handle my form? And Lord Shiva said, yes, but he was not, because he got deluded by by Mohini Murthy form. So that just shows that we have to be very careful when we are aspiring to be devotees of the Lord, because Krishna's Maya is very, very strong and we can get really deluded.
Thank you so much.
I have a question, Hare Krishna. Brahma is supposed to be not having a temple built for him on earth. Is it true, or what was the curse? Is it possible to explain his position?
Yes, it is absolutely true. And there is a pastime behind it, which I'm not able to recollect. I wish I could recollect. There is only one temple of Lord Brahma, and that is in Pushkar. That is the only temple existing on this planet. But there is a pastime where Lord Brahma was cursed that he would never be worshipped in his form. Unfortunately, I don't remember the pastime on top of my head right now. I've read it several times, but I'm blanking out right now. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Thank you very
much. So Mataji, I have a personal question. So as a professor and grahastha, how do you find time to practice Krishna consciousness and do any services?
Several things, I guess. I think number one point is association. Association. As long as I'm in the association of devotees, I think we all enthuse each other. And we are very blessed to be in one of the most important temples that Srila Prabhupada visited, ISKCON Los Angeles, New Dväpara, which is a very, very active temple. And we get a lot of wonderful personalities passing through the temple and enlightening us with classes, lots of sannyasis. The congregation is huge. We have wonderful devotees. So that's one aspect. Association keeps me going. Secondly, having a good home atmosphere and a partner and a spouse who's very supportive is very important for maintaining a very balanced spiritual and material life. Of course, we have material aspirations, spiritual aspirations. So trying to maintain that balance until I retire, which I hope should happen soon, can dedicate full time to, to the temple. But I guess, and of course, the most important is Guru Maharaj's mercy, without which nothing is possible. So at times, Rukmavati Mataji, the balance can be very difficult to maintain. I'll be very honest. Sometimes the work takes up a whole lot of time. Like, for instance, my friends who are doctors, they are Brahman initiated, and they're spending 18 to 20 hours in the hospital because of Corona. And I'm just asking them, how do you get time to chant your rounds? They're chanting the rounds when they're driving because there's no time for them. They have extra duties to attend to Corona patients. So how do they maintain? But I think if your desire is very strong and you have good association, again, I would say number one element is association. If you don't have association, it's very easy to become complacent and really go off track. So number one is association.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mataji. So devotees, before we end, just a quick update on tomorrow's fast breaking time. It's from 5:26 a.m. to 10:26 a.m. And next week is a very big festival in New York City Rath Yatra. So please plan to attend. That will be on 12th June. So we'll update you through WhatsApp group and emails. So thank you so much, Mataji, and we are looking forward for more classes. Do you have time for one more question, Mataji?
I didn't realize it's your Ekadashi today because we had Ekadashi yesterday, but thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk on Ekadashi. It's very auspicious.
Yeah, Mataji, is it okay?
Yes, please. I have the time.
Yeah, Soumya, go ahead.
I had one more question. This was also a personal question. I've wondered it for a long time, but people who are initiated by gurus that have a lot of disciples and they don't really get to meet them often and get to ask personal questions and get that guidance, personal guidance, because it's not as one-to-one. There's so many disciples. So are they as successful? Can they be as much as good devotees without that personal association and direction from gurus that are big?
Excellent question. And I'm going to give you an example of the purest devotee, Srila Prabhupada himself. How many minutes or how many days of association did he have with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur? Just a few hours or maybe even minutes, on the veranda where he went with his friend, where Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, "You are well-educated people, why don't you preach in English?" That was just a few minutes. And then in Radha Kund was another few minutes. But look what Srila Prabhupada has done. So in terms of Vapu and Vani, Vapu is personal association and Vani is through instruction. Vani is much more important because all our answers that we have, what we need to our questions are actually all of them in Srila Prabhupada's books. And our gurus, the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, are all basically speaking exactly what Srila Prabhupada is saying. So even if we don't get personal association, and if we are getting instruction through email or through telephone or letters or whatever it is, it's all coming from Srila Prabhupada's books. And in fact, most of the spiritual masters say, read this book, read that book. It's written in this book. It's all in the instruction of Srila Prabhupada. Of course, we as human beings are sort of tailored in a way that we seek association, where we are able to see the person, talk.
Mataji, you got muted.
Yeah, I got muted. Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, so I would say, Soumya, it's nice to have personal association, but really of the two, Vapu and Vani is more important. Because everything is in Srila Prabhupada's books, and it's nice when you get a personal instruction from your spiritual master, like a specific service or a specific duty. That's different. Then you follow that, heart and soul. But overall, if you have personal questions and you're not able to find the answers, then All the answers are actually in Srila Prabhupada's books, all the answers. It's just a question of reading it. And it's simplified and maybe expressed in a more lucid manner by our own spiritual masters, but they all got their knowledge from Srila Prabhupada's books themselves. But again, having said that, it's nice to have personal association anyway.